Right, let's get this started. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Jonny Bevan and I am the police burnout coach. And today we're going to be talking all about overwhelm because if you're a cop, especially your detectives, you are going to have experienced overwhelm. And that's the first thing I want to say is it's perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with you. But what we're going to do today is show you what overwhelm is, where it comes from, and show you some tips and tools to get out of it. Okay. Because we don't want to stay in overwhelm because it just is a bad place to be and feels awful, doesn't it? So that's what we're going to do. If I talk through just quickly about how it's going to sort of the layout of it, how it's going to go. The chat is disabled in the fact of you can't talk to yourselves, but you can talk to me. Okay, so when I might just ask questions because I want it to be interactive, and then you can just put it in there, and then I'll see it, but no one else will. The reason is I just want you focused on what we're talking about, and not sort of chatting amongst yourselves. There's also Q&A. So if you have any questions, so if I ask you something, I'll say put it in the chat. But if you've got a question, put it in the Q&A and I'll answer it live. So I won't be using your names or anything like that, unless you want to share something. And if you do want to do that, if you do want to answer, if you do want to come on and share something or something you're like, actually, no, I'm not quite getting this, and you want to talk about it more, then just stick your hand up. Stick your hand up and we can bring you on live. But obviously be aware, everyone else will see you. But this is like a webinar style. It's not like your Zoom or your Teams meetings like we often use at work, where we can see everyone. This is only I can see who's in there. No one else can see anyone else. Does that make sense? Hopefully. And I think that is it. So that's the chat. The only other thing is it's being recorded. So obviously, if you don't, like I say, no one can see that you're on here, but I'm recording this because I'm going to put it back out. I'm going to send it out to my people on my email list and to put it out for other people to get the benefit from it. So if you've got any issues with that, obviously drop off, or it doesn't matter because no one knows who you are anyway. Right. So let's get started then, because the reason I focus this solely on overwhelm is because I see such an issue with it in the police, and obviously outside the police as well. But obviously I'm a police burnout coach, and overwhelm causes so many issues. Now, a bit about me. I've been in the job now for 16 years and I'm still in it. So I'm a police burnout coach. I retrained back a few years ago. And the reason that was because I had experienced getting close to burnout a couple of times, never wanted to admit it, probably wouldn't have ever admitted it. And I used to go in these cycles of stress, but never want to admit it. You want to be like that person who's strong and want to be seen that you can cope, and you're worried about your reputation. And that was taking a toll on me. It was having an effect on my performance, my productivity. I was procrastinating more, and I was definitely overwhelmed with work, and it was affecting my home life. It was affecting my home life because then not switching off and not being present. I didn't really realize how much that was affecting me until I sorted it out and addressed it. And the way that happened was my wife got into coaching. I was very resistant to it because I thought this is different. This doesn't count for the police. This is very different. We deal with very different sort of side of the society, and our job is it felt like the risk we hold is so different. And so I was very resistant to it. So if that's you, that's fine. I just beg you, just listen, because honestly, for this, once I applied it, it just changed everything for me. Gave me a totally different outlook. And I had gone off. I took about 2 years to get out of where I was, which was on child protection. I went to the regional crime unit, but then once I found coaching, I was like, actually, I want to go and see if this works back where I came from. And I came back, and it did. And the thing is, what I find with this work is it's practical. There's no end to it. You can apply it to whatever you want, and it works in the moment. So a lot of things, I'm not dissing any other things. I think all the other things are good. Like some people do breath work, some people do yoga, some people do meditation, some people go to the gym. Those things we can't always do when we're feeling stressed at work. Okay. And when the overwhelm's coming in, we can't always take ourselves off and do these things. And whereas I found this is stuff you can do in the moment, and you can move yourself out of this feeling of stress and overwhelm and start being more productive. So that's a bit about me. Where sort of, and I'm still on, so I'm on child protection now, I'm part-time because I do this, and this is my real passion now, is helping cops reduce their overwhelm, stop procrastinating, and actually be able to switch off so they can get their work-life balance back. So that's what I do. But today is going to be focused, really honed in on overwhelm, because I see it everywhere. Whether I sort of sit around and you see people like whether it be they've got something from family court, they've got a CPS memo that's come in, and it's God knows how many pages long, and they're just thinking, oh, I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. Then they're looking at all their other crimes going, I just haven't got time. I haven't got time. And then they can feel this overwhelm coming in, and it just then they're not productive because they're in this brain fog. But I think sometimes we think it's just the people on the ground, just those sort of detectives and police officers and police staff that are dealing with those. I spoke to a DCI the other day, and the first thing they said was, I was asking something, they asked how it's going, and they said straight away, well, like everyone else, overwhelmed. And I thought, this is such an issue, because if those people at the top are feeling that way, actually that is going to filter down. And the very unique thing with the police, as we know, is we can't switch the tap off. We're not builders where we go, well, if we've got too much work, we just won't take any more work on. Our work just keeps coming. So we can't often do a lot about that. But when we feel overwhelmed, we are often not very productive. So that's what we're going to address today. So first of all, what I want you to do in the chat is just put in there for me what causes overwhelm. So if we just I'll give you a few 30 seconds, a minute, just to put in there what for you creates overwhelm. Okay, because it may be very different for different people. Different things may trigger different people, but I can assure you it will be having the same effect. So first of all, I want to see what's going on for you and what you find triggers that overwhelm. So what we got? Yeah, complexities of the job. Yeah, and I think we'll all agree the job is always getting more complex, isn't it? Is as in like CPS want more. There's always more stuff being required of us. So complexities, the demand. Yeah, just the volume of the work. That's it, isn't it? There is what you said at the start. There's just so much coming in, and we can't always do stuff about that. The time, not having enough time. Yeah, it always feels like, and we're going to talk about time in a minute. Because I knew it'd come up. This feeling of not having enough time, and then what we do is we end up wasting more time. So I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But basically what we've got is a lot of the same stuff here. Those feelings of like, it's a complex jobs, the amount of work you've got on, the vulnerable victims you've got, that they're not having enough time, and not knowing where to start, not enough resources. All of that is what is sort of contributing to the overwhelm. But what I want to show you a different way of thinking about it. Okay. And I want to show you where our overwhelm comes from. Because overwhelm is a feeling. Okay. So let's put this here. Put that here. So overwhelm is a feeling. Now, feelings are things, same as emotions, that we feel in our body. Okay. So you'll feel overwhelmed, won't you? When people say I'm overwhelmed, you will feel that, and it'll feel like maybe your head's spinning. But you will feel it in your body. And thing is, though, what we need to know about overwhelm is we call overwhelm an indulgent emotion. Now, I don't mean that disrespectful. I don't say that you're intentionally indulging in it. It's not that at all. It's very much like I consider it a protective type emotion. Oh, hang on, I haven't put overwhelm there, I put feeling. What it does, it protects you from more vulnerable emotions. So we go, oh, because when we get a job and we're feeling overwhelmed, we think, oh, there's so much to do, I don't know where to start. When we start exploring it, what we often find is there's an underlying fear. Maybe there's a fear you've not done it before. There's a fear that you're going to get it wrong, a fear of being judged. Or if there's work coming in, fear of you're letting victims down, really sort of common. But often just say, like, I love the one of like when you got a CPS memo and you've got all these actions and I don't know where to start. And what happens is you feel this overwhelm come, but that overwhelm is protecting you from an emotion you don't want to feel, some sort of fear. Now, this is all perfectly normal because our brain is designed to do three things. We have this motivational triad, which is like the worst triangle ever there. Can you see that? Yeah. Actually, can you just put in the chat, actually, if you can, is any trouble seeing that? So you got here, you've got seeks pleasure. I put seeks. So the brain seeks pleasure, avoids pain, and it wants to be efficient. Okay? That's what our brain does. And it only cares about one thing. Don't worry about whether you're happy. It doesn't worry about getting the job done. And it certainly doesn't worry, this little primal brain, it doesn't worry about your long-term happiness. It's not thinking long-term, it's thinking in the moment. And all it really gives a shit about is survival. Okay? So this is what we've got going on. So whenever we find something that's making us feel uncomfortable that we don't want to do, our brain will go to work and try and avoid it. And we'll talk more about this. Is why we procrastinate. This is why we delay things. And we're sort of wired to move away from negative emotions. But what I show people is actually what we can do is find out where they come from and move towards them. And this releases the overwhelm and the procrastination. Because what's happening is you've got this going on, and then you feel the overwhelm, and then we do lots of other stuff, don't we? What do you do? If we pop in there now in the chat, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed? If you take yourself back to one of those moments when whatever you're doing, whether it's a job coming in or you've been given a case to do or you've been requested to do something, normally just before you go off on leave, isn't it? Or just before you have some rest days, but 2 hours before suddenly you got this stuff. What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? So you exactly that. So when you feel overwhelmed, you might start procrastinating. You might start scrolling on the phone. Yeah, that is always one, isn't it? And you start just spinning. Things I see people doing and I see myself doing is start complaining and moaning and just sort of going over and over and over the problem and having that brain fog and not knowing where to start, having everything there and not coming up with a plan. And all of that action is driven by the overwhelm. Okay. So you've got this feeling of overwhelm here. And then when we feel overwhelmed, what we do is, I'll put a little A for action. What we do is we do all this stuff, don't we? So we procrastinate. we procrastinate, we delay, we might complain, we don't plan, we don't prioritize. That's what I see a lot. We don't prioritize. And yeah, and someone's put in there, they don't start. They don't start. Now that sort of moves me on a bit, because that is often, all of this is our action, what we're doing. We're complaining, we don't plan, we don't prioritize, we're procrastinating, we're ruminating, we're spinning. So we're ruminating, ruminating is when you're just going over and over and over the problem. And actually, when you take that action, all our action gives us a result. So what happens is we don't start. Oh, that's right on the edge of my board, isn't it? So we don't start. So we can see there, I'm going to bring my board up a little bit. We can see there what overwhelm is producing for us. And I think we'd all agree it isn't very helpful, is it? So if you're thinking your outcome is to get this job done, if you've got a job going to court and you've got a CPS memo and you've got a tight deadline on it, procrastinating, delaying, complaining, not planning, not prioritizing, ruminating, and I would also put in there not asking for help, not working it out. All of that gives you this outcome or this result. The R is for the result, that you don't start. You don't move forward, do you? But what happens is we think this overwhelm comes from, oh, runny nose. We think this overwhelm comes from the situation, from the work we've got. Okay, because of course we do, because we've got this work. We've had this, say, CPS memo with 20 actions. So we've got this CPS memo, say, with 20 actions, and we feel this overwhelm. So we've looked at it and we feel this overwhelm. But this is what we call our circumstance, our situation. So someone else might have that. You might know loads of people that would feel overwhelmed when they have that, but not everyone would. And if you've got the memo, say you've been given the CPS memo and you're feeling overwhelmed and you show it to me, how do I feel? Well, probably nothing, because it's nothing to do with me. It's not my business. But the memo is still the memo. You've still got 20 actions. And this is the thing to realize is, and this is the good news, overwhelm does not come from this. And as long as we think it does come from that, we give all our power away to something out of our control. And then the next time it comes, we fear it even more, and then we get the anxiety about it. Overwhelm is an emotion in our body. It created from us. It can't be created by a list. It can't be created by the crimes we've got. It will feel like it does. But I can assure you, if you can then, because what I see a lot of people do, they get overwhelmed and suddenly they get out of it and they start getting motivated and start doing work. And you go, well, this hasn't changed. Maybe someone comes over and goes, I'll tell you what, I'll help you. Let's write a list and let's get going. And they do it. And they go, oh, I feel a lot better now. And you go, why? This hasn't changed. The memo is still the same. And that's the important thing to realize. Don't beat yourself up for going to overwhelm, but let's separate out the fact that it's not that thing making you feel it. Otherwise, this list, this workload has got complete control over you. And you're always going to want that to be gone before the you think once that's gone, then I won't feel overwhelmed. But then you've got the next job, the next job, the next job, and you're always going to feel the overwhelm, and you're going to feel helpless and out of control. And this is what I find: a lot of people come to me, they're feeling out of control. When we start showing them this, they start getting the control back. So if it's not this, if it's not your CPS memo, where we've used that for example, but it could be any, it could be your 15 crimes, it could be whatever, then what is causing the overwhelm? Because you're feeling that, aren't you? It's this bit in between that we don't even see. It's our thoughts. So you think you could have, that memo could already have been in your email. It could have been there for a week, or say a day. You've been on rest days. That memo was already printed, it's made, it's in your inbox. It's not affecting you then. It doesn't affect you until you see it and then start thinking about it. And it's that creates the overwhelm. And that's why it's important to realize that we'll call it motivational triad, because your brain's now going to work. And suddenly you're feeling this overwhelm. And often we feel the overwhelm because we think things like, I don't know where to start. There's so much to do. There's not enough time. So if we think, a real common one is, I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. And this is where you'll see a lot of difference in the work that I do to maybe that others do. A lot of people will be focusing on the work. But often we're not in control of that. Someone else has given us that request. And then we associate the overwhelm with that. And it's very common. Of course, that's how we're wired. When we feel an emotion, we're wired in a primitive way to look at what we perceive to be the danger in the outside world. Because if I say feel scared, I want to go, right, what is it that's making me feel scared? Is there a danger? Because I'm wired for survival. But we want to start looking inward, because we're not going to get eaten. There's no danger. We're not going to get killed or anything like that. The worst thing we could do is probably maybe a bit of judgment, which obviously we all fear. But we don't want to be looking to the outside. We want to start bringing this back inside and go, why do I feel overwhelmed? Because that's how we can then move ourselves out of it and start getting this work done. So if you look at this, you get your CPS memo and you think, I don't know where to start. Okay. And when you think I don't know where to start, you feel overwhelmed. So you can feel it come on. And now this is the really interesting bit then. When you feel overwhelmed, you procrastinate, you delay, you complain, you don't plan, you don't prioritize, you ruminate and spin, you don't ask for help, and you're not working it out. And when you do all of that, the outcome you get, the result you get is you don't start. And this is what we call the old self-fulfilling prophecy. See? We thought, I don't know where to start. So lo and behold, we don't start. So now we're even more confused. We've got even less time, because we might be thinking I haven't got enough time, and now we've wasted even more time because we're spinning and spinning and spinning. And this then feeds into this, and it's this cycle, this self-fulfilling prophecy. But we find it so hard to break it because we're not aware of this, or we think this is a fact. We think, I don't know where to start. And I say this to people now because this was me. I remember once having a pile of medical records, and for 4 months I used to think, I don't know what to do with these. I don't know what to do with these, and I felt real overwhelmed with it. And I just put them in my folder, and I remember they were in plastic. They all came in these plastic little bags, and there was loads of it. It was really I can't see it all, but it was a good a couple of foot high. And I used to get, when I got given, I thought, crikey, I don't know where to start with that. And so it was that, I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start with that. So I put them in my locker, and I think, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll delay. So there I am procrastinating. I'll do that tomorrow. That's fine. And then I get them out every day. I get them out, put them on my desk, and everyone go, oh, you've got to get through all that. That's loads. So that used to feed into my overwhelm. I'd be thinking, oh, I got a lot to do. And I never started on them. And for months, I used to bring them out and then do something else and get tied up with other work. And then this these papers then became this big thing for me. I was thinking about it all the time. And actually what I found is when I just started and got it done and just opened them up, it was nowhere near as hard as I thought it was going to be. And that is often the case. It's never as difficult as we think it's going to be. But our brain loves to keep us in overwhelm, because whilst we're in overwhelm, what we're not doing is we're not risking failure. We're not risking getting anything wrong because we're not doing anything. We're not risking being judged. So if we do something and then we make a mistake, we might be judged. And our brain, that's all it wants. Our brain wants to keep us safe. It wants survival and to be part of a tribe. And this is the part of the brain we need to overcome. It is just not helping us now. It was great when we were in the cave days. It is absolute shit now because it's causing us to delay all this work and increasing the overwhelm. Okay? It's just not helping us. So this is when you start having those thoughts, I don't know where to start. Just be onto them and just notice what you do. And one of the best ways to do this is just watch yourself. Just watch yourself. Because I'm going to give you some tools to do, the tools to use that you can use, practical tools in a minute. But really the underlying thing, the real issue is this thinking. And if you don't address this thinking, you will slip back into the overwhelm. So when you're going, I don't know where to start, just watch yourself and notice then how you don't start. Okay. And recognize, really good question is, what am I really fearful of? What is the real problem here? Is there a fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of getting it wrong? Because that was for me and for a lot of people I coach, that was the big problem. Because if you just start, then you might get it wrong. And so you have the fear of failure. So the overwhelm stops you doing anything and you don't fail. But what you do is overall you're failing because you're not getting the work done, and then you can't switch off. You've lost your work-life balance because you're overwhelmed and you're procrastinating. You've then got to stay on, or you're thinking about the work that you've not done. You're thinking about it at home, and it just spirals. And I know because this was me. I used to stay on. Everyone used to think I used to work really hard. And in a way, I was working hard. I was busy, but I wasn't productive. Because what I was doing was I was delaying those things I didn't want to do because I felt overwhelmed. And then I would then have to work on. And everyone think, well, he gets through a lot of work. Actually, the reason I was staying on was because I wasn't getting through all the work. Okay, so that is how overwhelm can affect us. So this is the thing, really. These are the problems. The thought, the work is not the problem. Okay, and I can't stress that enough. It might seem like it's the problem, and you say, "Wait, if I didn't have that work, I wouldn't feel overwhelmed." But can someone else have the same amount of work and not feel overwhelmed? That doesn't mean that you need to use that to punish yourself up. It just shows that there's another way to think about this, and if you think about it a different way, then you'll get a different result. Because one thing I like to show people is at this stage, which I have sort of stolen from Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits, is the circle of control and influence. I'm not going to go into it loads, but it's just a really good little tip for you, is when we feel overwhelmed, often, that's not very good now, is it? When we feel overwhelmed, it's often because we're focusing on the thing that we can't control. Okay, we're focusing on all the things outside of our control. So when we go like that, we've got a circle, and this is from the 7 Habits. He talks about the circle of concern. Not a very good circle, but it is a circle all the same. And in that circle of concern, you've got like getting the job done, like answering that CPS memo, being employed, maybe a reputation, all this sort of stuff. But there'd be lots of things in that circle that we can't control. So maybe the CPS deadline. Okay. Oh, CPS deadline. The actions on there. Actions requested. The time. We can talk more about time in a minute. We can't control time. Okay. We can't control time. All of this. So this obviously has an effect on us. This is our concern. but we don't have control over it. So these requests from other people. But then in this, what we have is an inner circle, which is our circle of influence. Okay. So this is the circle of influence. This is the circle of concern. This is out of our control. So now what is in our influence is our attitude. So that's how we think and feel in that moment. Those thoughts, I don't know where to start and how that makes us feel, that we can influence that. We can influence our actions, what we do in that moment. And when we start looking at what we can influence in that situation, when you've got like a CPS moment, you go, well, what can you influence? You could speak to your sergeant and ask for more time. You could ask for help. All of this is in your circle of influence. I'm not going to go into this a lot now because it's for another one, but that's often the stuff we don't want to do because that opens up vulnerability. But that's where we want to be. Because what happens is when you focus on this circle of influence gets bigger. When you focus on all the things that aren't in your control, when you're going, oh God, I got this time and it's awful, you waste more time, you shrink your circle of influence. So when you focus, your brain will want to focus on those perceived dangers, but we want to move it out of that, because as long as it's doing that, we are going to be out of control and we're going to shrink our influence. Whereas when we focus on what we can influence and move ourselves out of it, then it opens up. Okay? So that's just a quick one on there. And if you want to know more about that, read Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I've sort of taken this because it really, really works well. It's a great tool because you can just quickly go, what's in my control? What is in my control? What can I influence here? And you'll know if you're just focusing on the things that you can control. So that's overwhelm, where it comes from. It doesn't come from the work. Remember that. It doesn't matter that you feel it. It doesn't come from the work. It comes from the thinking. I don't know where to start. There's so much to do. There's not enough time. Okay. And that's really important, because if we create the overwhelm, we can get rid of it. It doesn't matter if we've got 40 crimes or however many, we can now deal with this overwhelm because we're not reliant on the work. And I'm going to now go through and talk to you about some tools you can use to help overcome this. But before we go into that, first thing I want to talk to you about is time. Because when we're overwhelmed, that is the first thing we blame. We haven't got enough time. This took me ages to get my head around. We go, if only we had more time. Oh, we haven't got enough time. And all time is never the issue because you can't get more of it. It's the one variable that we can't get more of. But it's so easy to blame time, because if you've got, say, 8 hours to do something, and I always do this, I draw a line, there's my timeline, there's naught, and I've got 8 hours to do a job, yeah? So if someone sent a request through and that's when I got to get it done by. If I go through and I look at how much I've got to do, and it's going to take me 20 hours, time is not my problem. And if I focus on the time and moan about the time, I waste more time. This is similar. If you think you haven't got more time, just notice what you do in those moments. You probably feel more, that's when you think I haven't got time, you feel overwhelmed. And we've seen what happens. You procrastinate and do all those things and delay and moan and complain, and you waste more time. But if you've got 20 hours of work and you've got 8 hours to do it, time is not the problem. It's what you're trying to fit into the time that's the problem. Because you can look, can I get more time? Or rather than being in overwhelm, go, can I get more time? So can you request, actually, you need this extended more? And we're sort of go, oh, no, we can't do that. Well, we can. They might say no, but at least we've asked. Can we work faster? Maybe we go, actually, we got this platinum standard. Do we drop our standard and work a bit quicker? Maybe that's an option. Is there things we don't have to do? Are there things that we can go, we don't have to do this? Look at that. Do the things we can just get done? Actually, that doesn't need to be done. Maybe that'd be. Or do we ask for help? And the thing is, when we blame time, we haven't got to do all that. And when we ask for help, then we fear that people don't think we can cope. So it's easier to blame time and sit there and overwhelm rather than face that. But that's the stuff we want to face. But if you've answered all these questions and there's no more help, there's no, you can't extend the time, but then you've just got to accept that what's going to get done in that time. And that's often the bit people find difficult. But to fight it, to fight the reality, to focus on that thing you can't control, means you end up wasting more time. Okay. So I just want to say that, because just notice throughout your day how much you use time as the excuse. If you have more time, but of course, if there were 50 hours in a day, then we probably get a lot more done. But time, we haven't got it. If we blame it, we waste more of it. So actually, let's look at what we can do. Let's not focus on the one thing we can't change. So there's a little bit on time for you. That's for a whole other session, though. So what I would say, first of all, when you're feeling that overwhelm, and I'm going to give you some practical tools now, which I use. Some of the ones I've used has really changed my whole work experience. Because I don't want you to think that I don't have these feelings of overwhelm. Of course, I've got a human brain, and my brain goes, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Oh, and all this. And of course, it comes up with it. But I've changed my narrative. So I catch those thoughts, and then I'll come up with, I'm learning, I'm working it out. Those thoughts promote learning, and they promote moving forward, and they get you out of the overwhelm. But what I like to do, I got a few little things I use, little hacks that I find when I get given that job and I'm like, oh, I don't know where to start. Is first thing I do is just pause. There's a time, if you're a procrastinator, there's a time you got to just make a start. But often we jump in and we start. We think starting quicker makes us more productive, but it doesn't always do that. Because what we do, we dive in with this head of overwhelm, and we're not organized, and we're flapping around, and we're not getting the job done. So we want to just pause. And the first thing we want to do really is sort of organize and prioritize. Because I always like to talk about priorities, because we get this work come in. So you get your CPS memo, and you go, oh yeah, but I got this job, and I got this job, and I've got this job, and I got this one, and my sergeant just asked me to do that. You can't have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 priorities. You just can't have it, because in any given moment, you can only do one thing. We talk about multitasking. Yes, your brain can multi-focus. You can listen to a podcast and drive. Yes. But if you're doing some work, you can't literally be doing the other work. If you're thinking about one job whilst doing the other, you're not 100% focused. It's going to take longer. So you've got to look at the priorities. And now I always think priorities are interesting, because in the 1400s is when the word priority came out, and it was singular. There was only one. Then we pluralized it in the 1900s. So now we got loads of priorities, and this is why we often feel overwhelmed, because everything's important. Now, we might have some work in our trades important, but actually, if something else comes in and that prioritize it, no matter how serious these jobs are or what's going on, in that moment, you've got to decide what is your priority. And that's what people struggle with, going, actually, in this moment, this trumps this. And if it doesn't, if you go, well, actually, I've got this person's really dangerous. Okay, well, maybe this is a higher priority. If they both got to be done, we got to get some help. We've got to get some help. And it seems so simple when we see it, but we think we need to take it all on. And this is what promotes the overwhelm. We think it's all on us. So if you've got two things that are equal and you can't put them, well, you're going to have to get some help, because you can't do both at the same time. So the first thing I like to do is prioritize and go, okay, right now, this is the priority. That's it. So that is my focus. So maybe the CPS memo comes in, you go, well, I got some time later to do that because I got this to do today. But if you go, no, with the time, this has to be done now, because maybe someone's going to be released from prison if you don't get it done. So boom, this is it. This is now priority. And you got to work. And this is the work I do with people. You got to do the work on your thoughts and your feelings around all this work you're not doing, because you've got to be able to move your mind away from it. Because if you're focusing on something you're not doing, you're not going to be productive. So first thing I want to do is prioritize. And then once you've got your actions, say you've got your CPS memo, break everything down into small bits. So write a to-do list, okay? So the first thing to do is prioritize. If you want to know any more about this, get in touch. And then write your to-do list. list of actions, and this isn't going to stay as a to-do list. This is the list of actions you need to do to complete your job. Everything you need to do. I need to do this. I need to review this phone. I need to speak to this person. They've asked me to speak to this witness. And it may be I need to speak to my sergeant to say I can't take on any more jobs. Maybe I need to say no to stuff when jobs come in. And you write this, you have this list of all the stuff you need to do. And rather than spinning overwhelm and going, oh, I'm diving in and flitting around, you've then got this nice list. And the next thing you're going to do is I call it obstacles. Oops. I call it obstacles and solutions, but you can call it problems, solutions, whichever. But you're going to write down all the obstacles that are in your way. Everything that's going to stop you doing this work. So when you're overwhelmed, you've got your to-do list, and you go, right, what's going to stop me? You might have, I've got rest days coming up. I haven't got enough time. There's not enough resources. There's other jobs coming in. I've got this job. I've got this appointment booked in. I've got this going on. And you'll have this list of all the reasons why you're not going to get it done. That's a good way to approach it, is what are all the reasons I'm not going to get this done? Write that down, and your brain will be saying you haven't got time to do this. I can assure you this will save you so much more time. The amount of time you spend in overwhelm will be crippling you, whereas this doesn't take that long and will just save you so much time. So you've written your obstacles, and then either your solutions or your strategies. And you come up with a solution for each obstacle. So if you go, well, if you're thinking, well, I haven't got enough time, we know time's not an issue. Well, then you're going to go, okay, maybe your strategy might be, I can speak to my sergeant, make them aware and say, I can't take on any more work. That might be one. It might be you've got other things on, so you might have to ask for help. It might be you've got to phone a victim and say, your job's not going to be done, and what I said was going to be done isn't going to be done because I've got this to do. Unfortunately, something that's coming in that's more of a priority. All these things we got to work on as well, because this will make us feel uncomfortable. But when we have this list, we have a list of obstacles, and we have a list of all the ways we're going to overcome it. And this could be, one of your obstacles might be, I don't know what this means. So you might have a CPS memo come in, and I did it so basically with someone once when they went, I don't know what that means. Well, that's your problem. That's your obstacle. I don't know what this terminology means. Phone the CPS lawyer, or go and speak to someone else and ask them what that means. That's your solution to it. But what comes up is, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to think I don't know what's going on. And it's all that shit we want to clear up, because that's what's stopping us doing the work and keeping us in the overwhelm. So we've got this list of obstacles or problems and a list of solutions and strategies. And then I refer to my list. Then what we're going to do is you look and how long each one's going to take. Or you're going to have these strategies and this to-do list. How long is each one going to take? And then if that doesn't fit in with the time you've got, then you've got the options that we talked about earlier. You can work faster. You can look to see, is there some stuff you haven't got to do? You can ask for more time. You can ask for help. And this is what people don't do enough. I see people where they go, well, I've got this phone to review. I've got this, and family or court have asked me to review this and this and this. And I've got rest days coming up, and they will work their rest days, all their days off, and burn themselves out thinking they've got no other choice. I'm not saying you don't work your rest days. That's up to you. But there are other options. And when you say, well, actually, can you get an analyst to do that? Can you ask for help? You say, sorry, I need someone else to do this. And if there is no one else, you still got a choice. Do you do your rest days, or do you say, well, this isn't going to get done? But that's the thing. So you have your obstacles and strategies, and then you put a time by the side of each one, what you've got. And then you put that down. What I do is I calendarize it. I stick it in my calendar so I can see that's all in there and it's done. It's going to get done. And if you then stick to that, it will be done. Okay. So that's the fourth bit, is you calendarize it. Because if we just keep this to-do list and we're staying in overwhelm and spinning over and over, every time we look at the list, we feel more overwhelmed, we feel more panic, we don't get stuff done. Was when we've done this and we put a time to it, and then we've gone, actually, this is in, we've removed all the other stuff that's going to stop us doing it. And notice all the things that come up of, yeah, but if that job does come in, well, if you end up accepting another job, you're not going to get this done. And like I say, don't blame the time. Time's not the issue. And then what we do is, after we calendarize this, we make a start. This is, and when I said before, you don't just jump in, you might think I'm contradicting myself. Sometimes you do just have to make a start, as in just for 10 minutes, just see what the job's like. This isn't diving in a place of overwhelm, going, oh, I'm flapping around and not being productive. This is when you notice you're procrastinating and you go, okay, let's just make a start. You notice that you're delaying and putting it off. But once you've done all this, you make a start and you just start getting the work done. Because it's actually the doing in the present that gets the work done. And the thing is, when you do this over and over, what you find is you have a strategy for getting yourself out the overwhelm. So when you have thoughts of, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do, you can like almost immediately answer it with, oh, it's fine, because we're going to get this done. We're going to get this done. Because you know you've got this sort of strategy. And I found this helped me no end. It's when someone gives me a job, I feel that immediate panic. I know that's not a problem. It's coming from what I'm thinking about that job. It's perfectly natural. But actually, when I can break it down, I can prioritize my stuff and sort of put stuff back, make this come to the forefront, list all of this, and just make a start. I know that job will get done. And what I've effectively done then is just change my thought process. Right from the start, my thought process is, this is done. And if we look at how that makes a difference, if you've got here your CPS memo with your 20 actions, and you're thinking, this is done, how differently are you feeling? Maybe you're feeling motivated, committed. So let's put motivated in there. And then you're planning. You're overcoming. You're prioritizing. And all these things that we just talked about, and it gets done. In there, I'm going to put difficult conversations, those things you don't want to do, and say. Yeah? So you've got all that, and can you see this is the same? This is the important thing to remember. This is the same. CPS memo with 20 actions hasn't changed. But you think, oh, on this done, that's not quite right, is it? This is done. That memo isn't creating the motivation, just like it wasn't creating the overwhelm. Your thinking is creating that motivation, and that is driving this different action. Because what a lot of people do is they try and change the action, but if you're trying to do that from a place of overwhelm, it's going to feel like you've got your foot on the throttle and on the brake. And that's how we burn out, because we're doing it from this really negative energy, and it feels exhausting, which is why we're going home thinking we're having a stressful day, and we're then having to unwind with alcohol and junk food and having that glass of wine and the beer, and that has an overall negative effect on us. When you use this, you will feel energized from doing your work, because it's the overwhelm which is probably tiring you out. It's staying in that constant spinning, because our brain uses 20% of our energy is from our brain, from our thinking. So you think, if you can conserve that and focus it in the right direction, how much are you saving? How much energy, instead of focus on all the things you can't control, how much of that energy is going into getting the work done. And it is a very, very effective process. And what I want you to take away from this is overwhelm is normal, but it's not an emotion we want to spend any time in. We want to recognize it, use this to move ourselves out of it, and start creating new thinking, a new perspective of it to get it done. And just realizing that actually not everything can be a priority. You might have, I have cases in my training where I can feel that anxiety and that come up when I start thinking about them. But I know it's because of the way I'm thinking about them. And I know if I stay in that state, I get that self-fulfilling prophecy of not getting it done. Because if I'm at home and I'm worrying about it, I'm not getting anything done. Yeah, I could work from home, but I want to have that balance. Balance is a real key thing for me. And if I'm thinking about it and working all the time and not resting, then I burn out. And you can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't look after yourself, you can't then be available for others. So it's about having that balance and learning to accept the reality of situations. But one thing I'll leave you with is people sort of sometimes think is if they're like this and they worry about it and they're in all like this and panic, that means they care. But yes, I do agree to a certain extent that that's obviously if you didn't care, you wouldn't have these feelings because you wouldn't have these thoughts about it. But it's about looking at what it produces for you. Is it useful to think you don't know where to start? Is it useful to you to think, I haven't got enough time? Even if you believe it, is it useful? Because I can tell you now, if I think I haven't got enough time or I don't know where to start, I don't start and I waste more time. So for me, I look and go, what is my outcome? And if my outcome is to get this job done, there is no benefit in thinking that. But there's every benefit in going through this process. And then you increase your confidence because you know when you can prioritize and that you're always present and you're always going to get the work done. So that is, I'm going to just make sure I haven't got anything else. That is it. That is overwhelm. That is, you should know now where overwhelm actually comes from, which will be massive for you. That is really the one takeaway I want you to have from this. Overwhelm comes from your thinking. Okay, if nothing, even if in the moment you don't believe it, just go, this is coming from me. If it comes from you, you can change it. You've got that step-by-step process where you can go pause, break it down, prioritize, break it down, come up with your obstacles, come up with your strategies, calendarize it, and then make the start. And then move yourself out of that overwhelm by coming up with new thinking. This is done, and realize it's that creates the motivation. And this is the power of the mind. And this is what's helped me come back into the world of child protection and be able to have the best of both worlds. Be more productive, go away thinking I've done a good job, and have the balance that I can switch off. I'm not waiting for my workload to reduce before I switch off because I realize this is a mind problem, not a work problem. So LCS, we've gone a little bit over time, so we're going to wrap it up. If you want to know any more, just get in touch. And if you think actually this is something you want to work on more, I work with people for 16 weeks at a time. I work with cops for 16 weeks. And I can tell you, after about week 4, you'll see a huge difference. You'll see the overwhelm coming away. And then we start working on actually what you actually want and how to create whatever you want. So if you're interested in that, there'll be a link to my discovery call. Please feel free to come on, just have a chat and just see where you are and see if this is something you want to do. But hopefully you can just take this away now and start implementing it and start reducing that overwhelm immediately. Brilliant. Have a great one, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.